we have the delight of having Laura Clayton McDonald with us.
Thank you.
Because this story of Microsoft coming to New York and you doing it, by the way, you worked at IBM before that.
I did. I was listening very carefully.
So which is a better organization now that we've had the conversation? So, I mean, it's fascinating for us to have someone like you here. Again, I'm not gonna read the bio, but I'll read at least the first sentence about Laura leads Microsoft's cloud-first, mobile-first strategy focused on revenue growth, organizational effectiveness, and operational excellence. But if you read on to your background, you're also doing a lot in New York City for education, for youth, to traffic, a whole bunch of other major projects. So we've just heard two presentations about organizations devoting themselves to using artificial intelligence and data for health purposes. You're using it for various purposes. So I want to kind of, first of all, let's welcome Laura for being here this afternoon. Thank you. And I can't help but have brought Nadella's book here, right, called Hit Refresh. We went with Reinvent. We could have done Hit Refresh, but we went with Reinvent because this was taken. And so I'd like to start sort of the high level of Microsoft, and then we'll come to what you're doing in particular in New York. But Satya was featured, I think it was about 3 weeks ago on Sunday morning, talking about the whole culture change and the whole journey of Microsoft. You've been at Microsoft now for a couple of years, but give us sort of an up-to-the-minute sort of flavor of, kind of what was before, what was during, and what's after. What's this journey all about?
Yeah.
And what's the cultural part of it, the sort of organizational and cultural part of it?
You're absolutely right. This is a journey. It's a transformational journey. And Microsoft realized that the market was changing. Customers were interested in personalized experiences. There was lots of changes, disruptions that were happening. And Microsoft was doing very well as a company, but realized that for the future, we needed to do something differently. And so Satya and our senior leadership team went on an offsite and started to think about what our purpose was. It actually began with that. Why are we here? Why does Microsoft exist? And decided to come up with a mission statement that was refreshed, renewed, and it's about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And that's a very bold, big statement. And everything that we do, from our values to the work that we do inside the organization, is all designed around it. So it almost doesn't matter so much as what's happening today, but are we preparing our team, our people, our employees for what may happen in the future? Because we know it's going to change.
I mean, also, look, we all, I think, recognize the story of Microsoft, which has such a dramatic beginning, obviously with Bill Gates in the founding. Mm-hmm. And then Ballmer, who was such a strong leader force. But then there was a whole chapter where people said, I'm not sure Microsoft hasn't lost its way. You're saying Microsoft really rededicated itself and took on a very, very ambitious vision. Then what happens to the organization that was built up through a few decades with Gates and Ballmer? What happens to an organization that was oriented one way and now has to be reinvented to go a different way? Yeah. How has that occurred?
It's a huge shift. You're absolutely right. There's so much structure, policies, processes, even a culture itself that has been developed as a result. One piece of the culture that we're trying to push in our history is that we were seen as a know-it-all company, one that just sort of knew everything, and you could come to us, we're just the experts on everything. And that is a huge change to move from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all culture. And it takes really a lot of sort of dedication, not only with the people, the leadership team, top-down processes, but training around what does it mean to be a learn-it-all company. One that is humble, one that open to learning new things and taking risks and experimenting.
So do you feel like that's occurring across the company? Are you doing that in particular in New York? How does that operationalize itself to be a kind of learning company as opposed to a kind of know-it-all company?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? So there's one thing to get a message from the top saying this is what we're going to do. It's kind of easy enough to say it. And then you have the folks in the field. How do you actually make it work? So one of the key characteristics about our culture is a growth mindset. So Satya spent a lot of time thinking about Carol Dweck's book regarding growth mindset and what you need to do differently to be open, to be experimental, to take risks. So I can say it's okay to take a risk or make a mistake. That's fine. But we weren't really a company that allowed for that. It didn't really manifest itself in the things that we did. So we actually went through a series of training all the way from the top, all the way through each of the organizations. We worked with a company that focused on high-performing cultures. They have a series of former Olympians that taught us what it meant to be a high-performing team. So we all have taken at least a few courses in that, and we all should understand what that means to be a high-performing team. It involves some meditation, drinking well, eating well, moving well.
So don't encourage this to drink well.
Well, to drink well.
They're okay on that front.
Liquids like this.
Like water.
And so, when you look at that sort of holistically, you are preparing yourself to perform at those highest levels. That's what Olympians do. We want a company that's made up of Olympians when it comes to technology, to empowering organizations, people, and on the planet. And it's something that we really take to heart. We each have a personal philosophy statement. So you should be able to speak to anybody, in my organization or throughout Microsoft and ask, what's your personal philosophy? Because we're all working towards being our very best. Mine is to live life in an exemplary manner, in all that matters, with curiosity, compassion, with humility, integrity, and optimism. And so you should be able to come to me at any moment in the day and say, you know what, I'm not sure you really showed up that well.
Living that philosophy.
Exactly. And we should be open to that. And so creating an environment that's all about that growth mindset is something that's top of mind for us.
And again, I want to stress the fact that the story you're telling is of not a founding of a company and setting out this from the beginning. It's of a refounding or reinventing again. And so Satya and now you, in the way you're playing your role, all have to do that. I think he also doesn't have the word empathy as sort of a central characteristic as well. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Because that's maybe we'll also give you a chance to talk about the kind of work you do, but it's empathy for customers, empathy for other employees.
Right. So he realized that probably one of those key factors that was missing in our ability to relate to others. If you're a know-it-all, maybe you don't need to, connect with folks. But if you're somebody who's a learn-it-all, you have that empathetic connection, that personal connection. You're going to get to know your customers. And if you do, you'll probably be more likely to be in tune with what they want to do. You have a way of sort of looking and embracing what they might be experiences as their challenges and their risks. So he tells the story in his book about he was going in an interview, and one of the questions was, what would you do if you saw a baby in the street? What would you do? And he said, well, I would call 911. I said, man, you need a lot of empathy, because why didn't you go pick up that baby?
Right.
Why didn't you, take that baby into your arms? And so that really stayed with him for such a long time. We're not saying that, we have figured out how to do this, right? And then that we're done with our journey. It truly is a journey. And so if you can have that level of empathy with your team, with your customers, you're going to be much more successful. Yeah.
So all of this is ambitious, it's exciting, I'm sure it's sort of inspirational in its own way, but the name of this session is how do you continue performing while transforming? So how is that balancing act done? I mean, how do you reinvent yourself at the same time? You can't say, competition, let us spend a few years reinventing, right. We'll get back to you, just hold everything until we finish. I mean, how do you deliver in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, you have to make time for it. I mean, clearly the time that we had before Satya, we spent 100% of it focused on performing, being the very best company. You actually need to carve out time of your day to actually transform. It does take time. It takes focus. You'll find us, as I mentioned before, doing the training on high performance. It's a full day of training, really getting into your personal philosophy statement, studying that. But it's one thing to take a class, another thing is to apply it every single day. So you may find us, perhaps we might start a meeting with a meditation. So we will do that at the very beginning. I remember my first day at Microsoft, we had a meeting in Redmond and all the senior leadership was there. It was my very first day. And they introduced the fact that we're going to talk about business, we're going to look at our numbers, et cetera. And they said, but before we begin, we're going to do some meditation. So the person that reports directly into Satya actually conducted a meditation with the senior leaders. It was that dramatic. It's built in to the way that we operate our business. So I took it one step further. We were meeting with a company that really was not interested in working with us in the local field. They really wanted to talk to Satya. So we had prepped Satya. We said, hey, when we bring this customer out, can you make sure that you redirect them to work with us. But when we got there, the team was really nervous. They didn't know what to do. They were unsettled. They said, could you do a meditation with us, Laura, and so we can get really settled and be ready for this customer? And so I did. I took us through the meditation. It was only about a minute. And then before the customer arrived, they said, could you do it with the customer? This is a customer that's a top transportation company. Their CIO was there. And I asked for permission. I introduced myself, asked for permission to indulge me in doing some meditation. The team feels that this will help us become much more centered and focused. And they kind of looked at me a little bit, but that's okay. I went ahead and I did the meditation with the customer. The second day, Satya came around and asked, what was the greatest feeling that you got from the session? How did you feel about it? And they said the best session was the meditation that we did. This is something that I would never have thought of in all of the places that I had been in my career. But Microsoft has given me this opportunity to do that, to make it part of not only how I conduct business, but part of my life. So that's how you do it.
Oh, that's a great story. I just want to mention the organizers. We're actually going to scrap happy hour. We're just going to do meditation.
We're going to meditate.
So 4:45
settle in your chairs.
Will begin. And no meditation now while you're listening. We want all eyes open. You mentioned Redmond. I think one of the things that again is striking about this conference today is here we are in New York, and there's the Fifth Avenue store. Your offices are Times Square.
They're just right across the street.
Right across the street here. So what's that been like? I mean, establishing in New York and creating the same kind of spirit and the same kind of I don't know if it's the same profile of employees or different employees, but how do you take what's being built in Redmond and bring it to New York, or is it something different, like Watson is different to IBM? Tell us about the New York side of it, and then maybe also tell us about some of your exciting projects, because you're doing some amazing things.
Sure. I mean, so we have the spirit of Redmond here, but then we also have the New York environment, which is really exciting. It's such a vibrant place, and that folks actually in Redmond view New York as the leading region. In fact, if you can do it well here, you can do it anywhere. And so that's really how they really view New York. So we have this sort of exchange of ideas, but clearly we have a lot of the structure that's set by Redmond that we've adopted for New York. It's exciting to be here. We're excited about having the Fifth Avenue store. It's one of those leading flagship stores where you can go in at any time and get trained up on any of our solutions for free. You can get tech support for free. You can experience the HoloLens, and I think there's a sort of an exhibit regarding that here. So it makes it really exciting to be a part of this organization, and New York as being one of the flagship stores for Microsoft. Microsoft is doing a lot in the community. One of the things that we work with is 92Y. In the Giving Tuesday campaign, we've been a sponsor of that. We've been a sponsor of Girls Who Code. We've had classes held at our offices. So we bring in a lot of community to make a difference. We also run something called a City Next Cabinet. And so we work with the mayor's office in economic development or sustainability and figuring out ways in which we can help support using our tools. So even for Giving Tuesday, as an example, we use some of our analytics tools to find out where all the giving was being done all over the world and try to do some predictive analytics around it. So it's a company that's really involved in making a difference in the community in all kinds of different ways.
I mean, I haven't been to your offices, but do your offices look like a typical New York office building, or they feel different?
They feel different. It's very exciting. It looks like a Silicon Valley office. So it's very colorful, open concept, very few offices. Really, everybody gets to sort of collaborate in that environment. We've got about 5 floors, I think, in the building. And we've got customer level floors where we actually have a sort of a theater style room. We have our equipment laid out there. Folks can play. So it's one that looks a little bit different than a typical, I think, New York office.
So let me ask maybe a couple last questions, and then we're going to open it up for broad questions. I guess one of the issues is you coming to Microsoft at this stage in your career. You obviously made the choice to do this. I don't know whether I could characterize you as a change agent or what the term is, but you certainly are in a leadership position, and we have a lot of people here that are clearly on their way, if not already in leadership positions. What advice do you have for being in a large company, going through such an ambitious kind of reinvention, trying to change its culture? How do we perform effectively as